My name is Farnia Fernell, and I am thrilled to see you here, really. Together, we're here to deliver a refreshing, just in time workday session meant to set you up for greater productivity. Well, for those of us joining for the first time, our series is called Leadership COGS, and today we're talking about less is more. My career trajectory has been filled with doing too much too often. I can remember my father would always say, make sure you work hard. Make sure you work hard. And contextually, for those of you that don't know me, after years as a Fortune 100 global leader in financial services and in consulting, I realized that there was a gap in my understanding. I'm a first gen. So my father saying work hard, he's saying it from a very different cultural vantage point. I studied systems engineering. I trained in business. I trained in process and I mastered technology. But my difference in culture caused me to struggle with many unwritten rules that oftentimes help the best leaders and teams to thrive. So I used what I knew and I focused on what I didn't know and tried to learn that too, which was elements of psychology, neuroscience, coaching, and I launched the Lenserf Group. And now, actually, this week we turned 12. And in that time, we've helped thousands of leaders and countless teams in more than 44 countries to soar past their limitations and exceed their potential. And in this time, again, I realized that there are four pillars that keep people in a state of high performance. And I call these pillars COGS. What is COGS? Quick reminder, C is for celebrate, consistency, which is a key attribute of high performance. O is for taking ownership of not only your being, but also your actions. G is for the growth that we all can afford to experience after we get out of being stuck. S is the stamina to stretch into whatever is next in spite of whatever discomfort you might be feeling. So, our focus today is on the G for getting out of the glue and moving towards that growth. Again, we're talking about less is more. And if any of you have ever chosen to take a vacation somewhere where meals were fully included, just drop that in the chat. I like vacation where I do nothing. And in those instances where all you have to do is show up and the food just comes to you and there's a place to sleep and they clean your room, you understand what it means to experience less being more because you care less about all of the outside needs of the moment and you care more about your restoration and peace of mind in those instances. So let's start. So less clutter is more clarity. A good friend of mine, she's a feng shui master, Master Boone, actually, in Australia and New Zealand. And her late father was responsible for bringing feng shui to the West. She often talks about creating space and the energy that comes as a result of that. You know, the prefrontal cortex, it's called like our executive function. It's that part of your brain that's responsible for decision making, focus, impulse control. It requires space in order to function effectively, in order for you to function effectively. So, constantly switching tasks and overscheduling or cluttering yourself mentally or physically, if you have papers everywhere in your office, papers here, papers there, clutter, clutter everywhere, that diminishes your ability to engage in that executive function. So less clutter equals more clarity. When you keep too much around you in your professional space, it clouds your thinking and blocks your creativity. So what can you do as a leader? Well, there are a couple things you can do, and I'm just going to go through a couple. There's a lot more. You could spend a lot of time on this. First, you can block white space on your calendar specifically for reflection. I know there's some tools now, Microsoft has it that says focus time, right? But intentionally blocking that time so that you can, in fact, focus and have clear space without pressure on your calendar, dedicated on your calendar. What else can you do? You can reduce your agenda overload and improve the quality of your decisions. So if your meeting's scheduled for an hour and it has more than 4 or 5 agenda points, chances are that meeting is too crowded. And if you have other people coming to that meeting to join you to make decisions or to think, chances are they're not going to have the clarity that they need to make their best decisions. And you're going to struggle to retain the attention of those people who actually did show up. So you guys are here with me today, live, and you came here for a reason. And feel free to drop those reasons in the chat because I'd love to make sure that we get to them before you've dedicated this time. I want to make sure you get what you need from our time together. Number 3, less clutter equals more clarity. What can you do? You can encourage deep work time across your teams. So just like I'm asking you to block that white space on your calendar, you can ask your team to do the same. When are they focusing deeply, not superficially? And then for some of you that say, ah, this all sounds great, but I'm an entrepreneur and stuff just moves, it's a dynamic environment. If you're in that circumstance, just evaluate how much time you might allocate to different projects each day. How many times are you switching between one thing and another? Because the switching costs or those windows of time when you are switching your mindset, your attitude, your energy, opening up new documents, picking up and talking to different people, those switching costs are expensive. They're expensive to your business and actually you can't charge that time back to your clients. So reducing your project focus each day is beneficial. What else? Well, less doing actually means more leading, guys and gals. Less doing means more leading. When leaders cling to tasks that are better suited for others, they reduce efficiency and actually block your team from growing. Now, I'm human just like you. Sometimes I know ego gets in the way. I called it, leaning into another area of skill because I want to think of it as, oh, I've got this other skill that I can use right now too. And that's great. However, I remember one time I learned to use a digital tool for design. I was like, great. I want to see what these people do. I was so excited about the learning that I wanted to do more and more and more of it. And while it was so fun to do, it wasn't actually moving the needle forward for my business. There were other people who could actually do those tasks much, much better. And while it hurt my feelings, it hurt my feelings. I was like, I actually like doing this, kind of fun. It hurt my feelings, but that work was not aligned to my role. Your team, your team needs you to play your part, not play their part, to play your part. And in that instance, my part was to be a strategic leader, and to understand the visual design, but not to create the visual design. There's a difference. Understanding is one thing. Creating and putting in the effort when there are experts on your team likely able to do that on your behalf, there's a difference. A recent Gallup study found that CEOs who are skilled at delegation, they generate 33% higher revenue because they're skilled at delegation. Less doing and more leading. And you say, well, what can I do, Farnell? What can I do? One thing is you can audit your tasks weekly. What can only you do? What can be taught? What can be trusted? Or what can be transferred? I worked with an organization several years back, and they were moving towards operational efficiencies and evaluated every task that specific roles were doing so that they could empower those roles more fully by taking away some of what they were working on. So what we found was by taking away some core activities, you actually freed up a lot of capacity. A balloon that has an anchor cannot float. It cannot float, and it cannot have that high level thinking that is actually required to fill higher level roles. Another thing you can do is use the 70% rule. So if someone around you can do a task 70% as well as you, now this isn't 100%. I know some of you are going to be like, if that's you saying, I don't like 70% work, just raise your hand or drop a I don't like this in the chat. Because very few of us like 70% as a delineating factor in completion. Like it's 70% done, it's not done. It's 70% complete, it's not perfect. And sometimes 70% is enough to give someone else 30% room to grow. What else can you do? You can coach instead of control. So coaching instead of controlling means freeing the time while building important team capacity. So helping others to figure it out for themselves rather than doing it yourself. Make sense? Yeah? I see a head nod. All right. So we'll move to point number 3. So what else can you do less of? Well, when there's less noise, we know that there is more focus. When you can say no to a lot more, you make room for things that you can actually say yes to. And why does this matter? Well, you all have likely heard of the fable, the boy who cried or girl who cried wolf. And what happens when there's actually a wolf? Well, nobody in that village cared because people were too tired to move quickly and respond. They thought it was just another false alarm. They burned out. And that's the impact of more noise and less focus on other people. When you're paying attention to the rustle in the woods and paying attention to every little thing that doesn't matter and doesn't move the needle, people get burned out very quickly because they're in emergency mode constantly. That's the impact on others, burnout, rapid burnout. So what is the impact on you? Well, the impact on you is that when everything feels urgent, nothing gets your full attention. Nothing gets the attention that it very well deserves. Leaders who prioritize fewer goals often outperform those who try to do it all. There's The Four Disciplines of Execution by Franklin Covey. It showed that organizations that focus on 1 or 2 goals at a time were more than twice as likely to achieve those goals than those that were chasing like 3, 4, bing, bing, bing. They're chasing a lot of things simultaneously. And then what can you do to make less noise and to focus more deeply? What you can do is replace the multitasking with monotasking. Focus on one thing, get that done, move that dial, and then do something else. Focus on one thing, do that thing, get it done, and move on. Cut the number of your team priorities in half. If you have a list of 30 things you want your team to focus on, boil that list down. This is like creating a wonderful roux, right? Boil it down to the essential components and set and protect a daily big 3 for yourself and for your team. Boil it down to the top 3 things that have to get done today. And having worked in a lot of technology organizations and a lot of agile organizations, this might look like a daily stand-up meeting. So a lot of tech shops have stand-up meetings where people are literally standing up. And in these stand-up meetings, you go over the priorities of the day and you go over the priorities so everyone gets on the same page. We're all starting from the same point, and you're protecting the top priorities of that moment. So less noise, silence the noise. In this time when there is so much noise in the news that might be affecting you, there's noise in the economy that might be affecting your company. There's noise coming from elsewhere. What is your noise? And think about that noise and how can you use any of these things to silence your noise. So we'll move to our fourth point for today, which is less control equals more ownership. So I said today we're talking about the growing past the glue, because the glue in doing the more is a personal glue. That's a I do more because, and fill in your blank. I do more because I feel I have to. I think people have to see me moving a lot. I feel like if I'm not doing enough, that I'm not working. Whatever your reason is, it's an I reason. But when you think as a leader, leaders aren't only responsible for the I, they're responsible for their ecosystem. They're responsible for people and things that are around them as well. And if you always want that responsibility, the direct responsibility for the output of everything in your realm of control, you're not going to be able to control much at all. So when you give up some of that control, you empower people with more ownership. The O in COGS is ownership. You empower people with more ownership. When you take it off your plate and you put it on someone else's, you're building their capacity. You're building them up. And by building them, sometimes it feels like, oh, yeah, but they didn't get it right. After 2 weeks, a month, they're still not getting it perfect. But remember, just a moment ago, I talked about the 70%. If they can do it 70% as well as you're giving them that 30% runway, which is their capacity to grow. In doing that, you're building enterprise that way. You're building legacy that way. And you're building loyalty that way. You're giving them capacity to discover their capacity. And once they have that, that muscle is one that once it gets flexed, it doesn't like to unflex. When people see what they're capable of, at the Lenserf Group, we call that the EYP factor, the exceed your potential factor. When you see what you're able to do, chances are you're shocked. And your cup that you're holding for yourself, that small little cup becomes bigger. So why does this matter for you as leaders that are here with me today? Because leaders who loosen their grip inspire ownership, they inspire autonomy, they inspire accountability within their teams. Micromanagement, that, oh, did you check that I? Did you dot that T? And you even say it wrong? Check the I? No, you dot the I, right? You're micromanaging and you're eroding psychological safety. It's like, oh my gosh, people can't operate like that. They don't feel comfortable because if they make one small mistake, they feel like they've lost it all rather than seeing that failure as valuable fertilizer for what they will do next. There was a study, Project Aristotle, that identified psychological safety as the number one factor in high performing teams, that they feel safe. They feel safe. We wrapped up a leadership program just this weekend and saw someone who on week one said they absolutely do not want to speak in front of a group. At the closing ceremony this weekend, that same someone volunteered to sing in front of the group. Now, this was not a singing program, okay? But that same someone not only stood up in front of a group of people that only half of the room that person was familiar with, but they sang unrehearsed in front of a group. If that's not psychological safety, there was something about how that group was run that empowered that individual to feel that confidence. Trust builds that safety. The ability to be imperfect and not be judged as a result of that imperfection, that builds that sense of safety. So what do you do as leaders? That's why you're here, right? Well, you can set clear expectations, not step-by-step instructions, just clear expectations. What else can you do? Well, you can celebrate progress. So when this young person finished, and I say young person, I'm giving descriptors, and that might be too much because it didn't matter where this person was in their career. It didn't matter where that person was with their career or their life, to be honest. When this person volunteered to stand up and say something, that was self-celebration, a celebration of progress over several weeks. All right. So what else can you do? And this is the last point here is you can ask. You can ask. And I see someone in the chat put, this is hitting home. I just reorganized my team 6 weeks ago to step back and give my team more ownership. And I can assure you, for that person that dropped that in the chat, thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, when you step back and give them that runway, give them that 30%, you'll find that yourself and everyone else in that group will be able to soar so much higher because you built in the extra runway of making mistakes, discovering capacity, and recovering more quickly. And you will soar so much farther, so much faster. So the special question to ask is, what support do I need? I, as a leader, if you're leading people, leading a mission, leading a group, leading an organization, or even if you're just leading self, right? What support do you need from me to lead this? That's a delegation question. What support do you need from me? So do I have to clear a hurdle so that you can run faster? Do I have to make a phone call so that you can be empowered? Do I need to introduce you at the next meeting? What do I need to do? I saw someone put in the chat, I need a better team. Well, sometimes that's the case too. Sometimes it's a better team, and sometimes it might be better training for that team so that team learns to harvest all of their experiences a little more efficiently. So I encourage you guys to think about that. We're going to wrap it up and say less clutter is more clarity. Less doing is more leading. Less noise gives you more focus, and less control means more ownership for those people, those things that you are leading. So I thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to be back actually next Monday for another episode of Leadership COGS where we're going to talk about celebration. If you have any questions or if you want to evaluate how to take the busyness off your plate, feel free to connect. I actually have a do not do checklist, and I'd love to share that with you. You can drop your email in the chat, or you can send a message to team@betterspaces.com. I am grateful to have you guys here. Thank you for being here. Take care and be well.